Although separated by the world's longest land border, Canada and the United States are two countries built on a common history and geography, and today are intertwined in every way. The average daily trade volume between them is $1.7 billion. Many Canadians and Americans cross to the other side and return home every day, whether to earn a living, run errands, or just for fun. They have a common roadmap to act together on all global issues. They always act together in organizations such as the United Nations, G7, G20, NATO, and the World Trade Organization. The United States defense agreements with Canada are more extensive than any other country. The world's only two binational military commands are jointly owned by the United States and Canada. They are intertwined not only in everyday life and politics, but also in culture, education, and sports. Canadian immigrants make up the largest immigrant group in most of the northern United States. Marriage between people from both sides is common, and thousands have dual citizenship. In education, both countries cooperate widely, especially in universities. In sports, professional Canadian teams at the highest level compete in the neighboring countries' leagues. For example, in one of the most watched sports organizations in the world, the American Basketball League NBA, a Canadian team, the Toronto Raptors, won the championship in 2019. You may be thinking, okay, the two countries may be so intertwined, but Canada is the second largest country in the world. How can such a big country be a state? Canada has a huge territory, but 4/5 of its population lives in cities bordering the United States. The northern part of the country has an Arctic climate, and much of it is not suitable for human life. Although strategically important, the size of places where human life is absent or very sparse does not make much administrative sense. So why, after all, is Canada not a province of the United States? Or why hasn't the US annexed the major Canadian cities right next door? The area where Canada and the United States of America are located was colonized by Europeans after the discovery of the continent. The fertile lands of this world attracted Europeans. The migration from the old continent to this new world accelerated every day. When the slave trade from Africa began, the economic value of the North American lands soared. These were colonial lands, and these colonies were established with the idea of taking the economic value they produced to Europe in the form of money or goods. The European settlers of the new continent now saw themselves as the owners of the continent. They had either completely destroyed or enslaved the indigenous population. The European countries of their origin, on the other hand, were increasing the economic pressure on the colonies day by day and increasing the taxes they levied. These developments began to cause discomfort among the new owners of the continent. The Boston Tea Party of 1773, the first spark of American independence, was the first protest by the new settlers against Great Britain and its high taxes. Activists dressed as Indians and dumped tea from British ships in Boston Harbor into the sea. In 1756, the 7 Years' War broke out on the European continent. The main cause of the war was the colonial race between Great Britain and France. The 7 Years' War was actually the First World War in history. At the end of the war, the French territories in what is now Canada fell into the hands of Great Britain. The British gave the French in these territories the right to live freely with their own language and religious beliefs. The elite and wealthy French returned home, but the French people who had come to work remained on the continent. In 1774, the Quebec Act of 1774 guaranteed the rights and lands granted to the French. This event is responsible for the formation of a large French ethnic group in Canada today, and for French being the official language. In 1776, 13 colonies on the east coast of North America declared independence from the British. The 13 colonies wanted to move westward to expand their territory. There were lands that belonged to Great Britain, but had been given to French settlers by the Quebec Act for cultivation and trade. The immigrants from Great Britain who made up the 13 colonies never saw the French in Quebec as part of American culture. In 1778, 13 colonies started the American Revolutionary War against Great Britain. The American War of Independence had a very positive impact on the Canadian economy. A significant budget was allocated from Great Britain to the Canadian territory to suppress the war. During the war, the entire economic activity of the continent shifted to Canadian territory. 13 settlers loyal to Great Britain in the colonial territories immigrated to Canada after the Revolutionary War. You can imagine their British patriotism and negative view of the United States. Given all these developments, the American Revolutionary War also led to the formation of a Canadian identity. After 5 years of war, the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783. With the treaty, it became clear that Canada and the United States were countries of two different views. The United States tried to invade Canada in 1812 but failed. This failed invasion attempt strengthened Canadian identity. On July 1, 1867, the British North America Act was signed and Canada became independent of the British Crown. At the beginning of the video, I gave examples of how intertwined the United States and Canada are today. Let's look at the differences between these two countries today. The political structure in the United States is organized under two parties, Democrats and Republicans. Canada has a more fragmented political structure. The Conservatives, Liberals, New Democratic Party, and Greens are the four dominant parties in Canadian politics. There are also many smaller parties. While America is led by a president, Canada is a Commonwealth country led by a prime minister. Above the Canadian prime minister is the Governor-General, appointed by the King, and above him is the King of England. In business life, Americans are more hardworking than Canadians. Working life in Canada is similar to Europe. Workers in Canada have 2 weeks of vacation per year. At the end of the 5th year, this increases to 3 weeks. In the US, there is less leave. There is no article in the rules that legally stipulates leave. But even if companies give employees this right, a large mass of people do not go on vacation. Born in a common history and geography, these two countries today are as much intertwined as they are separate nations. All these features explain why Canada is not a state of the United States, but there are those who think that the two countries will merge in the future. Diane Francis, an American-born journalist who later immigrated to Canada, has even written a book on this idea. Francis's idea is based on economics, and she proposes that the United States and Canada should unite to counter the rising Asian economies. What is your view? Are Canada and the United States two different countries? Is there a possibility of unification in the future? Please write your answers in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video.